Today we're going to be reading a Chris Van Allsburg book, Two Bad Ants. Now Chris Van Allsburg is one of my favorite authors and he's the illustrator as well. But this one's an interesting story. I'm going to read you the back of the book, which is the summary. It also kind of gives you a teaser, which is, it kind of teases you to see if you're interested in reading the rest of it. So I'm going to read that to you first. The news travels swiftly through the tunnels of the ant world. A marvelous crystal has been discovered in a faraway place. The queen of the ant colony declares that the crystal is the most delicious substance she has ever eaten. Eager to please their queen, a group of ants set out to bring back all the crystals they can carry. But two of the ants are overwhelmed by the treasure they find in the alien world of crystals. When their fellow ants return, they stay behind. And so begins a terrible ordeal. Danger lies on every side. Are the crystals worth such a risk? Can you think what the crystals might be? What do you think that an ant might like that's a crystal? Let's read to see if we can find out. Two Bad Ants. The news traveled swiftly through the tunnels of the ant world. A scout had returned with a remarkable discovery, a beautiful, sparkling crystal. When the scout presented the crystal to the ant queen, she took a small bite, and then quickly she ate the entire thing. She deemed it the most delicious food she had ever tasted. Nothing could make her happier than to have more, much more. The ants understood. They were eager to gather more crystals because the queen was the mother of them all. Her happiness made the whole ant nest a happy place. It was late in the day when they departed. Long shadows stretched over the entrance to the ant kingdom. One by one, the insects climbed out, following the scout, who made it clear. There were many crystals where the first had been found, but the journey was long and dangerous. They marched into the woods that surrounded their underground home. Dusk turned to twilight, and twilight turned to night. The path they followed twisted and turned, every bend leading them deeper into the dark forest. More than once, the line of ants stopped and anxiously listened for the sounds of hungry spiders. But all they heard was the call of crickets echoing through the woods like distant thunder. Dew formed on the leaves above. Without warning, huge cold drops fell on the marching ants. A firefly passed overhead that, for an instant, it lit up the woods with a blinding flash of green-blue light. At the edge of the forest stood a mountain. The ants looked up and could not see its peak. It seemed to reach right up to the heavens. But they did not stop. Up the side they climbed, higher and higher. Can you see the mountain? Can you tell what that is? It's a brick wall. The wind whistled through the cracks of the mountain's face. The ants could feel its force behind their delicate antennae. Their legs grew weak as they struggled upward. At last, they reached the ledge and crawled through a narrow tunnel. The narrow tunnel is a window. When the ants came out of the tunnel, they found themselves in a strange world. Smells they had known all their lives, smells of dirt, grass, and rotting plants, had vanished. There was no more wind, and most puzzling of all, it seemed that the sky was now gone. They crossed smooth, shiny surfaces and then followed the scout up a glassy, curved wall. They had reached their goal, and from the top of the wall, they looked below to a sea of crystals. One of the ants climbed down into the sparkling treasure. Can you see the round wall they climbed up? Can you tell what that is? It's a jar. And if you look right here, you can see the last part of the word. What do you think that is? Quickly, they each chose a crystal. and they turned to start their journey home. There was something about this unnatural place that made the ants nervous. In fact, they left in such a hurry that none of them noticed the two small ants who stayed behind. "Why go back?" one asked the other. "This place may not feel like home, but look at all these crystals." "You're right," said the other. "We can stay here and eat this tasty treasure every day forever." So the two ants ate crystal after crystal until they were too full to move, and they fell asleep. Daylight came. The sleeping ants were unaware of changes taking place in their newfound home. A giant silver scoop hovered above them and then plunged deep into the crystals. It shoveled up both ants and crystals and carried them high into the air. What do you think that giant silver scoop is? Do you think it might be a spoon? What do you think the crystals are? Have you figured it out yet? I think it's sugar. The ants were wide awake when the scoop turned, dropping them from a frightening height. They tumbled through space in a shower of crystals and fell into a boiling brown lake. What do you think the boiling brown lake is? Boiling brown lake, where you dip the sugar in. Do you think it's coffee? Then the giant scoop stirred violently back and forth. Crushing waves fell over the ants. They paddled hard to keep their tiny heads above the water. But the scoop kept spinning the hot brown liquid. Around and around it went, creating a whirlpool that sucked the ants deeper and deeper. They both held their breath and finally bobbed to the surface, gasping for air and spitting mouthfuls of the terrible, bitter water. Then the lake tilted and began to empty into a cave. What do you think the cave is? Can you see? I think the cave is his mouth. The ants could hear the rushing water and felt themselves pulled toward the pitch-black hole. Suddenly the cave disappeared and the lake became calm. The ants swam to the shore and found that the lake had steep sides. They hurried down the walls that held back the lake. The frightened insects looked for a place to hide, worried that the giant scoop might shovel them up again. Close by, they found a huge round disc with holes that could neatly hide them. A round disc with holes. What do you think that was? As soon as they climbed inside, their hiding place was lifted and tilted and lowered into a dark space. When the ants climbed out of the holes, they were surrounded by a strange red glow. Can you tell where they are? They're inside the toaster. It seemed that every second the temperature was rising. It soon became so unbearably hot that they thought they would soon be cooked. But suddenly the disc they were standing on rocketed upward, and the two hot ants went flying through the air. They landed near what seemed to be a fountain, a waterfall pouring from a silver tube. Is that the sink? The faucet from the sink? Both ants had powerful thirst and longed to dip their feverish heads into the refreshing water. They quickly climbed along the tube. As they got closer to the rushing water, the ants felt a cool spray. They tightly gripped the shiny surface of the fountain and slowly leaned their heads into the falling stream. But the force of the water was much too strong. The tiny insects were pulled off the fountain and plunged down into a wet, dark chamber. They landed on half-eaten fruit and other soggy things, and suddenly the air was filled with loud, frightening sounds. The chamber began to swim. Where are they now? Are they in the garbage disposal? Down the sink? Oh no. The ants were caught in a whirling storm of shredded food and stinging rain, but just as quickly as it started, the noise and the spinning stopped. Bruised and dizzy, the ants climbed out of the chamber. In daylight once again, they raced through puddles and up a smooth metal wall. In the distance, they saw something comforting. 2 long, narrow holes that reminded them of the warmth and safety of their old underground home. They climbed into the dark opening. Do you think that that's a safe opening for them to go to? But there was no safety inside these holes. A strange force passed through the wet ants. They were stunned senseless and blown out of the holes like bullets from a gun. And when they landed, the tiny insects were too exhausted to go on. They crawled into a dark corner and they fell fast asleep. Night had returned when the battered ants awoke to a familiar sound. The footsteps of their fellow insects returning for more crystals. The 2 ants slipped quickly and quietly to the end of the line. They climbed the glassy wall and once again stood amid the treasure. But this time they each chose a single crystal and followed their friends home. Standing at the edge of their ant hole, the 2 insects listened to the joyful sounds that came below. They knew how grateful their mother queen would be when they gave her their crystals. At that moment, the 2 ants felt happier than they'd ever felt before. This was their home. This was their family. This was where they were meant to be. So sometimes we do things that we know we're not supposed to do, like the 2 bad ants did. But if we just remember to do the things that we're supposed to do and follow the rules, we'll remain safe. I hope you enjoyed this story. I'll see you next time.